The Orcs reside deep in the dark corners of Middle-earth, where shadows exist and the scent of war dominates the air. As the final battle of the War of the Ring faded into history, the Orcs were left facing an uncertain future. Did they hold to the remains of their revenge, or did they make unexpected alliances, motivated by the light of hope for redemption in an era where they lose their power? Today, we dive into the dark history of the Orcs, those deadly foot troops that have been a permanent presence in the great battle between good and evil. From their terrible origins under Morgoth to their role in Sauron's Black Forces, join me as we explore their complex background and find what took place to them after their Dark Lord perished. Orcs weren't originally the terrible creatures we know them to be in Middle-earth. Their narrative begins in the ancient past, when they were elves, species of enormous beauty and grace. However, these elves fell into Morgoth, the first evil lord's dreadful control. Morgoth's dark magic twisted and corrupted these once noble beings, transforming their bodies and souls into barbaric orcs. Morgoth planned to create a race of devoted minions and soldiers. By manipulating the elves, he not just created a strong army, but also portrayed his own evil mind full of thirst for power and dominance. Their beginning was brutal and humiliating, converting creatures of light into forces of darkness and conflict. Despite their terrifying appearance and personality, orcs had their own difficulties and struggles. They were separated from their original nature and suffered with a deep sense of grief and uncertainty. Their existence was a constant struggle between the remains of their old personalities and the brutal reality of their new role as evil soldiers. Therefore, the Orcs' origins are not only a story of darkness, but also of tragic change and the loss of who they once were. As we proceed to the core of Dol Guldur, allow me to reference a quote from Silmarillion. Orcs were made by Morgoth out of the race of the elves, perverting them into a mockery of the fair folk. This remark reflects the tragic transformation of the elves into the orcs, representing their evil and corrupting influence that defines most of the Silmarillion's beginnings. During the War of the Ring, orcs were more than just field warriors. They were center of the Sauron and Saruman's evil plan. Their aggressiveness and constant attack influenced the result of almost every important battle. During the events of Helm's Deep, orcs and the awful Uruk-hai took the fortress with almost supernatural violence. Tolkien clearly portrayed them. They came with a great noise like the roaring of the sea, and all that they bore was black and grim. Their numbers were stressful, and their continuous attack came close to breaking the stronghold's defenses. The conflict was a sad reminder of their role as tools of destruction designed to create fear and despair. The Siege of Gondor showcased the Orcs' tactical prowess and their dark alliance with Sauron. The city's defenses were subjected to a relentless barrage of Orcish aggression, including the infamous siege towers and battering rams. Tolkien wrote, "The Orcs came like a storm, and their cries and howls were like the wind of the storm in the mountains." The Orcs' siege tactics and sheer numbers made them a formidable force, contributing significantly to the prolonged and desperate defense of the city. In the final assault on the Black Gate, Orcs played a crucial role in the massive, chaotic clash between the forces of good and evil. Their presence was not just a physical threat, but also a psychological one, as they represented the embodiment of Sauron's dark will. The clash at the Black Gate was described as a storm of darkness and hatred, with orcs as its fierce harbingers. Their role in this climactic confrontation underscored their importance in Sauron's strategy and the extent of his reach. Despite their brutal nature, orcs were also seen in the quieter, more insidious roles during the war. They conducted raids and skirmishes that disrupted supply lines and spread fear among the Allied forces. Their capacity for relentless harassment and disruption made them a persistent threat throughout the conflict. Ultimately, the orcs were a critical component of the Dark Forces' strategy. their actions pivotal in shaping the conflict's outcomes. Their sheer numbers, combined with their viciousness and tactical cunning, made them both a formidable foe and a symbol of the pervasive threat posed by Sauron's armies. When Sauron fell, the region of Middle-earth took on an entirely new look, but the orcs were left in a dark and shocking reality. Mordor, once an active center of darkness, has become a dim wasteland. The mighty castle of Barad-dûr had been left to ruins, and the orcs, who were once fierce and powerful, were now wandering aimlessly around the ruins. They felt lost without their lord. Tolkien portrayed this sense of lack of direction with the shadow of Mordor lifted, the orcs were left in a land stripped of purpose and leadership. Many orcs tried to flee, while others, lost and confused, floated aimlessly, unable to make sense of a world that had gone forward from their evil history. In Dol Guldur, the setting was equally sad. The fortress, once an outpost of horror, now stayed abandoned, its walls expanding with an unsettling calm. The orcs that had served here felt dispersed and lost, attempting to get around a world in which their previous power disappeared. Tolkien described this as haunting. Dol Guldur, now silent and desolate, echoed with the ghosts of the orcs who had once served its dark purpose. The fort had become a reminder of a previous period, and the orcs who survived were left to deal with their broken lives. In Moria, the aftermath was both terrible and unsettling. The mines, once a vibrant base under the darkness of the Balrog, have become silent and empty. The orcs who made Moria their place of residence were either driven away or destroyed, leaving the once bustling mines empty. Tolkien made a moving observation. Moria, now bereft of its orcish inhabitants, was left to the echoes of its ancient grandeur and long-forgotten strife. It was a place of haunting calm, an intense remembrance of the dispute and destruction that earlier flowed into its dark hallways. In other places, the fate of the orcs was varying and unpredictable. Some took refuge in the outer reaches of Middle-earth, attempting to escape from a world that no longer desired them. They were aiming to create new identities, but their efforts were frequently seen with mistrust and hatred. Tolkien remarked on this by writing, "The remnants of the orcish tribes wandered, seeking refuge or redemption in a world that had cast them aside. Their time as servant of darkness had come to an end, and they faced an uncertain future full of challenges." Overall, the end of the War of the Ring reflected an important turning point for the orcs, although not in a clear manner. Their former positions were no longer relevant, freeing them to explore a new world free of their negative influences. The ghosts of their past remained as they sought to find their place in a new and uncertain society. The defeat of Sauron marked a new beginning, but it was also a period of fierce battle and rebirth for the orcs. Some questions arise as we consider the fate of the orcs in the aftermath of their fallen evil lords. The orcs grew as both terrifying and fascinating creatures in Middle-earth's dark corners, where shadows hide and the smell of past battles remains. How did these once powerful and fearsome individuals deal with the end of their dark era? Did they cling to their rage and conflict, or did they seek new paths in a world free from Sauron's hold? After Sauron's defeat, the orcs found themselves within a world that seems to have forgotten them. Their once mighty war screams have faded into an unpleasant peace. In the quiet periods of reflection, an orc sat among the broken pieces of his stronghold and spoke softly to his companion. "All these years of war, and for what? A land that no longer has room for us." Another, eyes tired and voice heavy, said, "We were tools of darkness, but now, what are we if shadows of our previous selves?" In the ruins of Mordor and the strange isolation of Dol Guldur, their discussions were filled with an ache for a thing they had never fully known: calm. Each orc faced a serious, terrifying question. Could they give up on their past and build a new identity in a world that seems unaware to their situation? Considering the concept of orcs seeking redemption leads us to analyze Tolkien's advanced knowledge of their nature. Tolkien struggles with the concept in Letter 153, where he considers the natural wickedness of orcs as creatures corrupted by Morgoth. He elaborates, "They would be Morgoth's greatest sins, but that would be going too far because by accepting or tolerating their making necessary to their actual existence, even orcs would become part of the world, which is God's and ultimately good. This means that, while orcs have been twisted into maliciousness, they still belong to a universe built with the potential for goodness. As a result, the idea of orcs seeking redemption is not completely impossible. It presents an incredible paradox. Creatures born of darkness, but living in a world fundamentally bent toward light and redemption. The end of the War of the Rings world provides high ground for exploring this redemption. Without Sauron's brutal dominion, orcs have to face their own existence and potential change. The desire for peace and a new identity shown in their reflective conversations suggests a wish to escape their dark history. However, the road to redemption is filled with difficulties, among them of which is acceptance by the other races of Middle-earth. The question of whether orcs may blend into these communities or stay permanent outcasts is important. Their journey to find a new position in the world is affected not only by their own willingness to change, but also by Middle-earth's ability for forgiveness and acceptance. This dual conflict highlights the complicated and captivating story of the orcs' eventual redemption, making it one of the most interesting sections of Tolkien's legendarium. At last, the orcs of Middle-earth, formed from the corruption of once noble elves, tell a heartbreaking story of change and tragedy. Their horrific histories and key roles in the War of the Ring demonstrate their depth beyond simple villainy. After Sauron, the orcs face an uncertain future, struggling with their identity and place in a new world. Tolkien's observations offer an image of hope for redemption, encouraging us to reflect on their ability to change and the possibility of basic kindness. As we consider their fate, we must wonder whether the orcs can overcome their tragic past and build out a new destiny in Middle-earth. Furthermore, will Middle-earth extend a hand of redemption to its most mocked inhabitants? Thank you for joining me on this trip through Middle-earth's dark and complex orc past. Their story is one of change, tragedy, and a search for identity in a world that has moved on from their evil past. As we leave the darkness of Mordor and the ruins of Dol Guldur, we are left with deep concerns about redemption and the possibility of transformation. What will happen to the orcs in this new era? Can they find a place in a world that formerly considered them solely as tools of darkness? Please share your ideas in the comments section below, and remember to subscribe for deeper explorations of Middle-earth's extensive past. Until the next time, may your way be clear of darkness and filled with light.